Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training we are going to be going over the step-by-step instructions for coaching call number 4, which is titled The Dark Force Holding You Back. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Of course, why is this training important? We are continuing our theme inside of this module of putting your transformation program together and walking you through the practice curriculum so that way you can get practice finding your voice and really starting to get a habit and the skill of cultivating that frame of being able to provide transformation to someone else, okay? So as always, we do have the training outline available for you inside of the document. And then just a couple quick reminders, as always in the very beginning, organization equals organization. So make sure that you are keeping track of your students' notes. That is going to be very important. You are able to go ahead and use the notes that we provide as a template, or you can go ahead and model them and create your own, completely up to you, okay? The second note that I want to go ahead and pay attention to here is your practice training modules, because I want you to remember that everything that we are going through inside of this module is all really there for your practice, okay? All of the scripts that we are going to be going over in module 5 are only there for one purpose and one purpose alone. What is that purpose? To be your training wheels for you to be able to get the reps to help you start finding your voice. Do not forget this, okay? Do not get married too closely to the topics or the self-sabotage or the arc or the embedded invitations. The point was to understand those principles and to be able to go through this practice training curriculum so that way you can have the practice of being able to find your own transformation program and then being able to gear it specifically to the student that you are going to be working with. Ultimately, if you remember, the reason why we went ahead and took this approach is because we are going ahead and doing the done for you, do it yourself approach, right? We're starting off with done for you. We're providing you all of the scripts and the templates and the practice curriculum. So that way it lowers the amount of upfront work that you have, which is basically zero, and allows you to get into momentum. And then we're slowly going to then be transitioning into the do it yourself where, okay, now that you have the practice, you've gotten used to being able to speak these topics out loud, you can then go ahead and have the customization there for yourself. Because at the end of the day, every one of the RWA students' coaching style and voice is going to be different, as well as every single student that you coach in the one-on-one model is going to be different as well. And so ultimately, it is going to be up to you to take notes while you are delivering these practice coaching calls throughout this module, so that way you get an idea of what suits you, what you like, what you don't like, what suits your personality, how you speak, all of those kinds of things, right? Even the voice that I am using right now to be able to record these trainings, the same voice that I use when I actually go ahead and do one-on-one coaching as well, right? The sound that you're hearing from me inside of this training right now. This is not the way that I talk to our team, our coaches. It's not the way I talk to my family, my wife. I don't talk in this voice, right? This is the voice that I have cultivated through the reps of doing it over and over and over again, okay? And so that is going to be your responsibility here, is to be able to fine-tune the energy that you bring, how you show up on these calls. All of that is being cultivated by the reps that you are putting in for these coaching calls, okay? And then at the end of the module, we're going to show you how to actually be able to customize this structure and be able to fill in the 6 parts and be able to mix and match according to not only what suits you and what you want to include in your transformation program, but also what is going to be helpful for the student that you are actually coaching and providing transformation for. And so ultimately, like we did talk about inside of a previous training, is that by the end of module 6, you will also then have your intake form ready. And so then you will be able to go ahead and prioritize to the student that is joining your program, and they will go ahead and let you know, hey, this is what I struggle with, this is what I don't struggle with, this is what I want to focus on, as well as the goals that they say that they have that you go through in coaching call number 1. You will be able to go ahead and tweak and make changes and all of that kind of stuff, right? But here is the bottom line that you need to understand with all of this, is that none of this is going to work unless you learn to first find your voice and your confidence first. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the purpose of Module 5 and these practice coaching calls. And so keep on pushing through these practice coaching calls and get your reps in, because through the action that you take in this module, your own individual transformation program will be born. Okay, so for now, focus on getting in the practice, finding your voice, and becoming the best RWP that you can become. Because remember, you may not be ready now, but through the process, you will become ready. Cool? Sound like a plan? Make sure you let us know if you do have any questions about this, but I hope that is 100% clear, so that way you can go ahead and have the motivation and understand how all of this is going to come together as long as you continuously take action. Beautiful. Now let's go ahead and hop into the actual overview for coaching call number 4, because coaching call number 4, the one that we're going to go ahead and practice here, is going to be where you go ahead and practice how to handle self-sabotage. It's primarily going to be going over topics that you learned in module 2 of the RWA curriculum. Okay, now I want to go ahead and clarify something. Does this mean the way that you're about to learn it right now here in just a second is that this is how you will always deal with self-sabotage? Is this always going to happen to every single student that you deal with, always at coaching call number 4? The answer to that question is no. Where every single student is going to start to self-sabotage may sometimes change. However, you are going to notice, because of the trends that we've noticed, is that it typically does happen around coaching call number 4, around coaching call number 5. And that is why for this practice training modules and this practice training curriculum, we're going ahead and having you practice handling the dark force holding you back in self-sabotage in coaching call number 4. But in your actual curriculum, it might actually change left and right. So this is why we're having you guys practice this, so that way in real life you are able to go ahead and move it around for the student. Okay, so this is honestly the opportunity here in module 5 that Remote Wellness Academy is facilitating and your certification is providing you, is that you are able to speak out loud with other students and practice, right? Versus without this RWA program, without the certification, without going through this process, right? I say it all the time, is that you might not be ready now, but through this process, you will become ready, right? We are facilitating that process, because without this process, how else would you have been able to find a group of other students who are on the same path as you, where you could actually practice these coaching calls with? Right? And so what we're doing here inside of this program is that RWA is facilitating the practicing process for you during your certification, so that way you can expedite and accelerate the process of finding your voice. Okay, so for this practice coaching call, you will be practicing helping the student understand why they self-sabotage, using a lot of the things that we talked about in module 2 that you are already familiar with. But now, instead of being on the receiving end of that transformational knowledge, you are actually on the giving end of it, right? You're actually explaining it and teaching it and getting practice walking through that explanation. Now, on that note, I do want to go ahead and address another common question that does pop up around here, which is that, hey, is the wording, is the framing, is the scripting that we are about to go through that is provided in the practice coaching call number 4 to be able to help with self-sabotage, is that the only way to be able to handle self-sabotage with a student, right? Are there no other question sequences? Are there no other exercises, right? I don't know if I necessarily like this specific explanation. The answer to that at this point should be 100% clear, is no, right? Do not forget the purpose and the objective of module 5 and these coaching calls. It's to help you develop and find your voice. I've said this a gazillion and 2 times, but I really want to make this absolutely clear, right? Once you make it through all of these practice coaching calls, there is going to be so much that you are going to be able to tweak and change and move around. And there's going to be so many other exercises and question sequence that are going to be added to your bank and to your toolbox for your one-on-one transformation program, right? So we're going to be talking about a lot of that at the end of the module. And then honestly, as you go through this process, you are going to be able to come up with so many of your own as well. Okay. So for now, just do the practice calls and figure out what suits you and what does not. And then of course, along with that, you are also going to be going ahead and using a lot of the coaching skills that you learned in module 4, as we've spoken about many times in the past. And then as well as there are student action notes that are going to be accompanying this specific practice coaching call as well. Now, just to remember, these are the student action notes for your practice training modules here in module 5. We're going to be walking you through on how to tweak this, so that way, hey, maybe you don't actually have the student go through these specific activities. Maybe you don't explain it this way. Well, guess what? You have the student action notes template that you can tweak for your own training program as well. All right. And then obviously sending it to the student. We're going to talk about that in module 6 with the whole softwares and all that kind of stuff and being able to do that. And then of course, the coaching call guide that is also going to be available for this specific coaching call. Remember, this is only for your practice training modules. You will be able to tweak it, be able to make it something that belongs to you, be able to take the images, be able to make sure that all of that is something that you can tweak on your end to figure out what suits you and your style the best. Hey, maybe you like PowerPoint and maybe you like Keynote instead of, Google Docs and all this kind of stuff. Maybe you want to do something completely different. It's totally up to you, but we're providing you that structure, that done for you approach, so that way you have the momentum, you can get started, you can keep on going, and then as you are moving, you can then steer the car. Just make sure that you do have the licensing agreement in place, and then you are going to be ready to rock and roll. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the actual explanation of coaching call number 4. As always, make sure you do use the zoom in and zoom out feature. And then at this point, I do want to make sure that I always go ahead and hit the nail in the coffin here. Remember, the job of the script is to give you the tools and the ammunition. At the end of the day, you are going to have to understand the art of coaching, and you're going to get better at it through reps. And then at that time, you will be able to tweak it from there. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop into coaching call number 4 explanation. Of course, we are going to be starting off with rapport. That is going to be part number 0. There's no real change here in the script because it's going to be highly contingent upon the student that you're dealing with and how you guys' rapport is and XYZ. Biggest thing, just make sure that you avoid program updates and you kind of keep it general. The biggest thing is just make sure that you don't linger here. Make sure that you don't drag this on too long. It's just a matter of going ahead and building rapport. So that's pretty typical. We know how to do that already. Then we move on into part number 1, which is all about talking about what's going well. Pretty typical here as well. We're just continuing with our normal ritual. What I am going to go ahead and start doing inside of these scripts is I am going to go ahead and start providing variations. And obviously you're going to be adding your own variations as well. So, asking something like, hey, how did you feel after? And then repeat the action step that they committed to last week. What differences, big or small, did you notice as a result of adding that in? And so, there's a lot of variations for this kind of stuff. You're able to kind of mix and match, find out what works best for you. But the point and the objective is still the same, right? So we're continuing our ritual with that. And then no matter what it is that they say, you go ahead and verbally mirror that and you make a massive deal out of it because it is celebrating the win. So it's like, woohoo, go Tina, awesome. Really, really excited. That's amazing that you did that this past week, right? You're really bringing the energy so that way you are that force of positivity in their life. And that really has a positive dopamine effect to it, like we talked about in coaching call number 1. And we talked about that entire process there. From there, we go ahead and move on next to the next part, which is part number 2, which is all about challenges and obstacles. We go ahead and start off the conversation by asking, hey, I'm curious, did you come across any challenges or obstacles? Again, remember, it doesn't have to be necessarily this specific wording. It can definitely be something that you come up with yourself or what you find works best for you as well. And then if the student did not have any challenges or obstacles, you are just going to then affirm why this process or this action step was different for them. Now, you might have a question and say, hey, is it going to be always the exact same question? For more or less, yes, if they don't struggle. And the reason why is because the same question can be asked both in the macro as well as in the micro. Because remember, you're not asking, hey, how have you noticed that this entire program is different than what you've done in the past? It's more so asking them, hey, what did you notice about this specific action step, right? Whatever last week's action step was, hey, how was this specific step? How was this specific action that you did different from what it is that you did in the past? And so the same question is applicable in many, many, many different contexts. Okay, so that's if the student actually didn't have any obstacles. That's a potential question that you can ask. And then if they did have obstacles, there are a couple different question sequences that you can actually use, right? So one of them we already spoke about and we discussed in detail in the previous coaching call, right? That was all about the 12 over here, all about the MDA and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm not going to go through that here, but I just want you to know that that is a potential question sequence, right? And then the other question sequence that I'm going to go ahead and provide for you as a different modified version is one that is inside of the script. I'm not going to read through it right now, but there is about 6 questions that you can go ahead and walk your student through as an alternate question sequence if you really wanted to, right? And really for the purposes of the practice calls, remember, all you're doing is you're going through the motions, you're going ahead and getting in the reps, you're going ahead and getting in the experience. And so my recommendation is to go ahead and choose one of these to practice inside of the practice coaching call. So that way you can get reps with your partner. Your partner can basically go ahead and, kind of pretend or act like they had some difficulty. And then that would give you the opportunity, and you doing that for your partner as well, it would give you both the opportunity to practice these coaching sequences when something is not going right with your student. Okay. That's also very, very, very important. Okay. So those are two that are available for you. And then there's a third one inside of this specific script. And this is like, hey, typically around coaching call 4 is when they're like, oh, I'm having second thoughts, things are starting to get busy for me. Life is starting to get busy. The dopamine starts to fall. They're not as excited or motivated. And so they might come up and straight up tell you, oh my gosh, I wanted to skip today's coaching call because, I was bad. I didn't want to tell you because XYZ came up. And so what you do is you can actually transition into right here at this part and say, that's perfect that actually showed up, right? Because they're saying this as a way to be able to get out, right? They're saying this as a way to be able to say like, hey, that's because I'm off track because I was bad. But what you're doing is you're reframing that and you're saying, hey, that's actually perfect that you said that, right? Because today we're actually going to be talking about self-sabotage. So you're exactly on track actually, right? You're exactly in the right place. And so they are saying this because they think that, oh, I'm off track, I'm in the wrong place, this is not working anymore. And then when you reframe that and you say, hey, guess what? Me as your coach, I already anticipated this. We built this entire program expecting that this was actually going to happen. And so then you have a little bit of a laughter there, right? You go ahead and build some rapport with your student. And then you can go into clarifying, hey, what did the student mean by, I was bad or I wasn't able to follow through, that kind of stuff. You can then use that as another coaching sequence to be able to help coach around challenges and obstacles, right? And so at the end of the day, what I want you to know when we provide you with all of these different coaching sequences around challenges and obstacles is that there are so many different sequences that we could provide you to be able to help your student overcome challenges. Because all these coaching sequences is kind of like a series of reframes, okay? And so we even have a coaching sequence that we're going to be showing you later on is like what happens when a student in so many coaching calls is like on a high. They're doing amazing, right? They haven't really had any issues. Well, guess what? Like we already learned in module 2 with the upper limit problem, when somebody's feeling too good as well, they can start to self-sabotage because they're doing too well in their life, right? But at the end of the day right now is we don't want to overwhelm you with all of the different scripts and all of that kind of stuff, because the purpose of what we're doing right now is only for the purposes of practice. So that way you can go through the motions and find your own voice, right? And so down the road, later on in this module, we'll be able to provide a bank of all the different scripts and all the different frames and all the different questions and all the different question sequences and coaching sequences. All of that will be provided for you, but you just want to go ahead and kind of tweak things around, decide which coaching sequence you want to use, practice that with your partner. That's really the most important thing that you are doing at this stage, is being able to get that practice of speaking all of this out loud, not sounding like a robot, being able to have that confidence, that projection in your voice. All of that is what you are cultivating the skill of during these practice calls. Awesome. So that is going to be this specific part inside of coaching call number 4, which was all about challenges and obstacles. Next up, we're now going to move into part 3, which is about the new information, right? The dark force holding you back. Okay, so we're going to get into the new information piece. Now, a quick note about this and a quick note about dialogue. Okay, so inside of this script, I'm not actually going to be pausing for dialogue. Okay, that is going to be something that you are going to have to make an effort to do based off of the receptiveness, based off of the nonverbal cues, based off the body language that you are seeing of your student. Okay, so as you're coaching, as you're delivering this new information, remember, you want to make sure that you're taking time to pause for, hey, does that make sense? What are your thoughts so far, right? You don't want to be vomiting all over your student and lecturing at them. That's no good, right? And so that's why the art of coaching here is that you are not so stuck up in your head, worried about yourself, that you are unable to notice what the nonverbal cues of your student are. If you see that, hey, they're distracted, they're looking somewhere else, maybe they're trying to sneakily, text someone on the side, pause, stop for a second, be like, hey, are you with me? What's going on, right? So those are the in-between things. Those are the nonverbal, the art of coaching things that are very difficult for us to be able to portray within a script. So you want to make sure that you are doing that, even though inside of the example that we're about to go through right now, as I deliver the script, we are not going to be pausing for that dialogue. Okay, so just make sure that you are flowing everything naturally using your coaching skills and based off of the receptiveness of the student that is in front of you. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into new information, which is part number 3. And so as always, we are going to go ahead and get permission. But like I said, I am going to go ahead and start including variations for you as much as possible. So that way you can start to be able to develop your own as well, right? It's like, hey, ready for something new? Are you ready to move forward, right? These are all just variations that you can even come up with your own. So don't worry about trying to stick too closely to the script for that. And then once the student actually acknowledges, from there, we go ahead and introduce the dark force, okay? So we say, hey, have you ever wondered why there are so many times that you know what it is that you need to do, but you just can't do it, right? Does it ever feel like something is holding you back, right? Why is it that you start making positive progress towards your dreams and your goals, but then you self-sabotage? Have you ever wondered that, Tina, right? So you can see how I'm ad-libbing in between here, right? Whenever you try to set goals and make change or improve your life, right, something always seems to be pulling you back, right? I definitely feel it a lot of times in my life as well, right? It's like there's a monster that's always sitting in the corner ready to pounce on us. You see how I changed from you to us? Very important distinction there as I'm kind of coaching through this, right? Ready to pounce on us whenever we try to make a change in our life, right? What is this, right? Who is there to blame, right? What is the dark force that seems to be against us that makes us suffer? Well, you know what? I'm here to tell you, Tina, that there is actually something that has been stopping us. There is actually something that has been stopping you as well. It's not just something that we've been imagining, okay? It is real. And so in today's coaching call, we're going to uncover what this thing is so that way we can actually defeat it. Sound interesting? Sound pretty cool? I know, it's exciting, right? You see, so that's the kind of this frame. I'm kind of going back and forth between the coaching frame and then this explanation frame here for RWA students, is that what we're doing here is we're really going ahead and introducing the topic and really building up that suspense so that way the student can kind of tee it up and make it more serious, right? And then from there, we move into giving context to show importance, right? So what we do here is say, okay, hey, Tina, right now you might be wondering, why in the world are we even talking about such a strange topic in this program that's really all about getting healthy, right? Well, here's the thing. After helping so many everyday people transform their lives and really change their lives for so many, years, months, weeks, whatever you want to say here, depending on whatever works for you, right? We started noticing a big difference between those who succeeded and those who did not, between those who changed their lives completely and between those who actually remained stuck where they are, right? Because in the past, we used to focus on just the tactics alone, right? It was, hey, here's a meal plan. Hey, go to sleep. Hey, do this. Hey, work out, all this kind of stuff. But then we realized that there was something more to it. Even though the instructions and the action steps were straightforward, even though we would give everything for the students to succeed, we noticed that, hey, there were some students who would be completely able to transform their lives, and then there were some other students who would stay and completely remain stuck. And so we asked ourselves, hey, what is that missing secret ingredient, okay? And so that's exactly what it is that we're going to be talking about today. Sound like a plan? And so again, remember, we're just going ahead and increasing the suspense. We're giving the context. We're really showing the importance. So that way, whatever we say next, it's priming the student's mind to be able to accept that information. Now, a couple quick points on this. Note the usage of the word we. Even though you are doing this one-on-one, you are a part of an organization. You are a part of the Remote Wellness Academy family. Do not forget that, okay? You are not alone in this endeavor. A lot of coaches don't have the support that you have because of the fact that you are a part of this program, okay? What your product is a system that has been proven with hundreds and thousands of students in the past, okay? And so you want to find strength in that. This is going to be another point that is going to help decimate any imposter syndrome that you have, is because when you use the word we, you are taking on the frame of being an organization. It's not just you alone in the corner decided to come up with some revelation that you got and just made all of this up. You went through an entire certification for this. You went through this entire process, right? And so lean into that and become a part of an organization. And that's what we're providing here at Remote Wellness Academy. And so you are able to use the word we. And then when they say, hey, is it just you? You have coaches? Are Are you working with somebody else? It's like, yeah, hey, I'm a part of an entire organization. This entire curriculum is something that has been proven and tested out. And so that is what we are doing here, and just making a note of the word usage of the word we. And then once the student actually is receptive to this, right, we're actually making sure that they are on the same page with us. We then pop into the new information and we say, okay, so here's the thing. After witnessing, dozens, hundreds, thousands, whatever it is that you want to say, students and clients come through our transformation programs to change their lives and change their health and be successful. What we started noticing is that one thing is in common with all of those who are successful. What is that one thing, right? What is that secret ingredient? Is that whenever those who are successful actually achieve the success, they are no longer the same person that they were before. Because here's the fact. Who you are right now, Tina, is not who you will be when you achieve the things that you want. This is what it looks like visually. And then obviously in the guide, you're going to have these images, so you can go ahead and show that from there, right? It's like, hey, this is what people completely misunderstand. People think, oh, I'm just going to take who I am right now, which is someone who doesn't prioritize health, someone who doesn't take health seriously, and I'm going to force myself, who is this person who doesn't care about health or doesn't take it as seriously, and I'm going to force myself to get healthy. And so this is what it looks like. People say, okay, I am this current version of myself, right? I am this person right now, and I'm going to force myself to go ahead and get healthy. But here's the thing, and this is what most people don't understand, Tina, is that this is not how it actually works, right? What happens is that you must first become the person who is worthy of health, the thought patterns, the habits, the behaviors, the actions, the decisions, and then great health will actually come and find you. This is what it looks like visually. This is what it means when you actually become a person who prioritizes health, and then health automatically becomes a byproduct of the person that you became. So it's not like you tried to go out there and try to get healthy. You worked on first becoming the person, and then health came and found you, right? And so really what we're doing with any goal that we're talking about is that what we're doing is we're focusing on becoming the person first, and then everything will happen automatically as a result of that. In other words, getting healthy is the byproduct of becoming the person who is worthy of amazing health, not the other way around. Okay, Tina? And so this is what it looks like visually, right? So our current self created our current situation, and we're working on becoming our desired self in order to create our desired situation. It's about becoming the person who effortlessly achieves that desired life, and then boom, the desired life is created by that new person effortlessly. And so we sometimes call this going from your version 1.0 self to going to your version 2.0 self that effortlessly creates your desired life. Okay, so this is what it looks like visually. You have your version 1.0 self, which is who you are right now, and that is the person that has created the life that you have right now. And then when you focus on becoming your version 2.0 self, that version 2.0 self, that new identity, creates whatever desired situation you want to have, right? And so what we do is we work on becoming this new person, and then this new person has the thought patterns, has the habits, has the decision making, has the beliefs, all of that to be able to create the desired reality that we want. Is this making sense so far, Tina? I know it's a little bit abstract. I know sometimes this is really different than how we might have been talked to about how to be able to achieve goals in the past, but this is what makes what we do here so transformational and so different, right? Is that making sense? Pause for the student, right? And the cool thing about this, Tina, is that this applies to everything, right? This applies to money as well. You don't go out and make $1 million. What happens is that you become $1 million person who has the thought patterns, the habits, the behaviors, the actions, the decisions, and then $1 million comes and finds you. You don't go out and have an amazing relationship. You become the person who is worthy of having an amazing relationship, and an amazing relationship will come and find you, right? So, and having an amazing relationship is the byproduct of becoming the person. And so this applies to every single area of life. This is what it looks like visually, right? Is that once we become the person who is able to actually have that desired reality, have that desired situation, whether that be in health, wealth, relationships, or a connection to something greater, then the desired situation happens automatically. Pretty cool, right, Tina? I know it's very, very different, and it's very, very cool. So what are your thoughts so far, right? How is this different, or how is this a different way of thinking than you have seen others try to achieve their goals, right? And so here you can go ahead and pause, have a little bit of dialogue. All of that is very important. So that way you're not lecturing at them. It's like, hey, 4 to 5, 6 minutes of like talking, and then you go ahead and have a little bit of a dialogue. And you're going back and forth with this. So that way it doesn't feel like overwhelm. It doesn't feel like a bunch of new information, right? And so then once you have that dialogue, you say, cool, let's go a layer deeper. deeper. Unfortunately, most people try to achieve their desired dream life as their current version 1.0 self, right? But the problem with that is that when you try to achieve your desired dream life as your current version 1.0 self, you can only keep up that new life for a little while until you get pulled back into your current situation. Why? Because you haven't yet become that person. You were forcing something that wasn't normal to you, that wasn't natural to you. And then what happens is that your current version 1.0 self sabotages, right? And so this is what self-sabotage actually is. So if you think about when somebody tries to get healthy and they're still trying to become the same person, but then force themselves to get healthy, well, guess what? They're only able to keep it up for a short period of time, and then they slip back into their old habits, right? Same thing with money, same thing with having an amazing relationship. And so when we put all of this together, right, and we talk about self-sabotage, this is what self-sabotage actually looks like visually, right? The person is still their same old person, and they're trying to go ahead and push themselves and force themselves to be able to have this desired situation when it's not a part of who they are. And what happens is that they don't attain their desired situation, and even if they do, they get it for a short period of time, and then boom, they just slingshot back into their current situation because they just haven't become the person who is able to effortlessly create that reality, right? So always remember, the secret is to become your version 2.0 self, is to become the version of you that can effortlessly create that reality. And then once you become that version of yourself, your desired situation, your desired reality, your dream life will effortlessly get created because you've automatically become that new person. That new person has their minimum standard of living being the goals that you had, right? And so this is what I'm trying to go ahead and show you, Tina, is because this is so powerful and has the power to really transform your life. So what we got to do is we got to focus on creating our desired situation by not trying to actually focus on the outcome, not focus on the situation that we want to have, but first we got to focus on becoming someone completely different. We got to focus on becoming that version 2.0 self, and then identity or paradigm or whatever words you want to use within your transformation program. That's completely up to you to do that, right? And then you want to go ahead and have some dialogue. Remember, a couple minutes of talk, and then you go, hey, so are you with me so far, Tina? You pause for a little bit of student engagement, right? And so this is ultimately, Tina, what we call the seasons of life, right? Because every season of life is going to require a different version of you, right? So different versions of you for different seasons of life, right? And so this is how all of the top people in the world live their life. Every time that they want to make a change in their life, or there is something that's changing in their life, what they do is they evolve themselves, okay? And this is really the big secret, right? We have to learn to be able to evolve ourselves at every stage in life. Remember, I changed the you to we because in a one-on-one setting, it's a little bit better, right? And so visually, Tina, this is what it looks like, is that we have these seasons of life, okay? And within every single season of life, we have to evolve in order to thrive in that season of life. And then once we actually attain that new evolution, we become that version 2.0 of ourselves, well, we go back directly to being, hey, that version 2.0 is just now the new baseline. And then we have to get ready for the new season of life. But the problem that happens with most people is that they get stuck being their version 1.0 self. And so now they're in a season of life where they're like, hey, things have changed. My life has changed. My kids have gone to college. My life has completely radically transformed, but they've been stuck being their version 1.0 self. Most people don't even know that any of this exists. And so they're not able to consciously and deliberately actually become their version 2.0 self. So that way they can thrive in the new season of life that they are going in, right? And so that's what I'm going to be helping you through this, is that, hey, you want to have a health transformation, but none of that is going to be possible if we only focus on the tactics. Yes, we focused on energy. Yes, we focused on sleep. Yes, we did all of that. But if we only focus on the tactics and we only focus on things that you're doing, we're not going to be able to have that transformation the way that we want. And so we have to be able to change the identity level. And then that is the key to be able to have lasting transformation and change. Okay, Tina? And so is that making sense now? Is it making more sense? Student responds, yep. Awesome. So if you remember at the start of today's call, we talked about the monster that was always holding us back, right? The dark force that was always keeping us from being able to do what it is that we wanted to do, right? What was that thing that was stopping us? Well, now that we understand that, hey, our version 1.0 self, our current identity is the one that is holding us tied to our current situation, well, then we realize that it's our version 1.0 self that is responsible for creating our current situation, nothing else, okay? This is what it looks like visually. And so the truth is that until we take 100% ownership and responsibility for this fact, we will not be able to change. Why? Because taking 100% responsibility means taking back our ability to respond. That's literally what the word means. Responsibility means ability to respond. And so we need to take 100% responsibility for where we are in our life. Nothing else, right? And this is very tough for a lot of people to hear or understand or really kind of come to terms with, because the thing is that there's a difference between, hey, this is my fault and this is my responsibility. It might be somebody else's fault that something happened to us, but at the end of the day, it's our responsibility because we have to take ownership of our ability to respond. That is what freedom actually looks like. Because if we are the only ones that are responsible for our life, then we are the ones who have the power and the ability to change it. But if the government, our parents, our society, the world is responsible for our life, then guess what? Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to change ourselves until the world is fixed, right? And that's a lot harder, right? Now, you will notice a lot of times we are changing. You probably saw me do it a bunch of times. We're changing us and you're kind of replacing it. You're changing I's to us rather than you. You want to kind of avoid the you language a lot of times in a one-on-one setting. You can get away with it in a hybrid model, but really in a one-on-one setting, it kind of comes off more of like an attack. And so sometimes even though the script has the word you in it, you want to go ahead and kind of tweak it according to what feels the most natural, and you can kind of tweak it from there, right? So it's like, hey, we are responsible for everything in our life rather than, hey, you are responsible for everything in your life, right? And so when we take responsibility, we're taking back our ability to respond and change our situation, right? And all of this is because of our current identity, right? It's because of who we currently are. And that's okay because we can work on that. And so it's not our past, it's not our skills, it's not our parents, it's not our family, it's not the government. All of that is because of our current identity. And once we take ownership of that, we can then go ahead and be able to respond and change from that. But guess what? Does that mean that we go into despair and gloom and doom and just say negative things about ourselves because we're not happy with where we are? No. Why? Because every single version of ourselves served us for a season in our life. Do you remember this visual, right? And so we have to understand that we are the way that we are now because it served some purpose and protected us at some season in our life, at some point in our life, right? Now, it might not be serving us in this new season of our life, in the new place that we want to go, but in some version of our life, this current version of ourselves did. And so this is very important to understand because a lot of people, when they talk about bettering themselves and evolving, they're very quick to like poo-poo on themselves, right? Too many people, when they start to work on self-work and personal development, they start to say things like, oh, that means that I'm broken, I'm wrong. They start to judge themselves, they start to guilt themselves. But it's very important that when we go ahead and talk about transforming our identity, right? Transforming our lives, we're coming from a place of grace, from a place of understanding, from a place of love, and we don't approach letting go of our old self from this place of negativity. Does that make sense, Tina? Yes, that makes sense. Let them comment a little bit, right? Awesome. Cool. And then what we do is once you go ahead and get that, we want to go ahead and switch into dialogue mode. Okay. So awesome. So talk to me, Tina. Where's your headspace at right now? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts on this? Right. And then you go ahead and let them talk. Sometimes you're going to get a student that's a lot more talkative. Sometimes you might not. If they need more encouragement to open up, you can kind of give them a little bit of a pre-frame. Say, hey, I know this is new for a lot of people, right? This is what actually makes our program different from everything else that's out there. This is the reason why our students get lasting change, not because we gave a meal plan or a workout or any of that other stuff, right? All those other programs out there aren't actually helping their customers, their clients, or their students. Why? Because at the end of the day, until someone evolves their identity, until they become the person who can actually create that dream life, they will forever be stuck. Does that make sense? And so what we're doing here in this section towards the end of new information is that we're pausing for that proper dialogue, right? And this is also a very great place to kind of throw rocks at everything else that's out there, really increase the importance of this program in the student's life. So you always have to remember that even though you're going to be learning about marketing, you're going to be learning about how to be able to attract new students and new customers into your program, marketing really doesn't stop because even internally inside of the program, you're always reselling the person as to why what it is that they're doing is so awesome, right? And you can even throw in a little bit of mission there if you really wanted to, be like, hey, this is the mission that we have here at, NutriFit Wellness Academy or whatever, right? Is because school and society has never taught this foundational stuff to their people. And so what we're doing here is we want to be able to educate our students on this. And so that way, Tina, you can take this and be able to educate your children. You can educate your family. We want to break the generational ignorance on how to actually transform your life. And that's what this entire program is actually about. And so again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to break frame here for a second. I want to talk to you now as an RWA student, is that you can see like the passion that comes from my voice, me being able to talk the way that I am. It's not because I was born this way. It's because I've been able to find my voice along the way. And it's because I've had a lot of repetition. I've had a lot of experience with this. And this is the purpose of these practice calls. This is what's going to happen over time. The more you do this, is that you are also going to be able to find your voice, right? The reason I'm able to talk to you through a video and I'm still able to project my voice, it still sounds like I'm right there next to you, is because I've done this so many times within the one-on-one setting. And that is the opportunity that is in front of you right now to be able to start cultivating that voice so you can also get to that point as well. And so with that being said, that is the closing of the new information in practice call coaching call number 4. What we then do is we go ahead and hop into the experience exercise. Again, just a quick note on dialogue. I'm not going to mention that every single time, but you want to go ahead and note that dialogue is very important. Then what we're going to be doing here in practice coaching call number 4 is that we're actually going to go ahead and introduce the exercise of a new way of actually being able to see yourself. So you probably remember this from module number 2 for yourself, is you go into, hey, we're going to go ahead and do a mini exercise that's really going to go ahead and cement what it is that we talked about. Okay. So I want you to kind of think of your brain as 2 parts. Okay. So there's kind of like who you want to become and there's who you are right now. So visually, this is what it looks like, right? Who you are right now and who you want to become, right? So it's like, okay, version 2.0 self and then version 1.0 self. And then these two identities, what they're doing is they're fighting for control of the steering wheel of you, right? And we sometimes call this the conscious mind versus the limbic mind. Don't worry, Tina, you don't got to worry about those terms. But I just want you to know is that there are 2 parts of your brain, and this is all backed up by science. I'm just kind of simplifying it for you, is that there are 2 parts of your brain, and what they're doing is they're fighting for control over you, right? And so every single time that you're able to not make the decision that serves you and what it is that you want long-term, every single time that you forget your why, every single time any of that happens, it's because the part of who you are right now, your current version 1.0 self, won that battle of the steering wheel of you, right? And so being able to cultivate that conscious mind, being able to see all of this happening is very important. This is the exercise I want to walk you through right now, okay? Because this new way of seeing yourself is what allows you to be able to separate yourself from your version 1.0 self. And you can kind of see this other version of you inside of your head as like a puppet or a character that you control, okay? So this is what it looks like visually. And so what we're doing here is we're cultivating this muscle of being able to see ourselves from a third person point of view. We're like observing ourselves the way that somebody else would observe us, right? Rather than being in a first person view and we're kind of stuck looking at ourselves within ourselves, if that makes sense. And so this is like a new way to be able to look at yourself, right? Are you with me, Tina, so far? Right. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And so this is very different, unfortunately, to how most of society thinks about themselves, because unfortunately, without even knowing it, most of society is always being controlled with who they are right now, right? They let their version 1.0 self decide who they are and what is going to happen. And so this is what it looks like visually. They go ahead and let their version 1.0 self control their conscious mind. They let their version 1.0 self control the steering wheel without them even knowing that any of this actually exists, right? And so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and emphasize that from this coaching call going forward, it's going to be absolutely critical for you to start seeing yourself separate from your version 1.0 self, okay? So there's like the character, there's your version 1.0 self, and then there's you, that's your version 2.0 self, right? And so by seeing yourself in this way, you can start to more easily mold and shape your identity to become the person that you need to become in order to create your new dream life effortlessly. So yes, right now we're talking about physical health, right? But this also applies to wealth, it applies to relationships, it applies to your connection to something greater, it applies to life as a whole, is becoming the person who can effortlessly create that dream life that we want. Is that making sense so far, Tina? Yes. Okay. So this exercise that I'm about to walk you through right now here in just a second is all about shining light and being able to speak to that version 1.0 self that we have that is within us, okay? Because unless we acknowledge that she exists, or he, if it's a male that you're talking to, we can't actually transform our identity. Because remember, transforming our identity is critical if we want to have change and transformation that actually sticks. Otherwise, we're just going to end up self-sabotaging and go back to who we are right now, right? We can force ourselves for a short period of time, but until we actually become the person that can effortlessly do the things and finds enjoyment out of those things, we're going to have difficulty keeping it up. And guess what happens when we stop doing the things that got us to where we got to? We go back to how we were before, right? And so this is what we are talking about, and this is why this is so absolutely important. Now, I do want to go ahead and mention a couple quick points here for you as an RWA student, is that obviously for you, you have an entire module of this stuff, right? And so you know that you can go back and, there's the entire diagram with the circles of the being, the doing, the having. There's the entire example of like the smoker. If you remember, it's like one person says, I'm not a smoker versus I'm trying to quit smoking. All of those examples are available for you to pull from. But remember, the point is not to overwhelm your student with information. It's curated information, it's curated knowledge, just enough so that way they can bridge the gap and really focus on the doing. But sometimes you need the knowledge. There has to be information there so that way they have some sort of framework, they have some sort of foundation to be able to take action on, right? And so that's what we're doing with the new information, but you don't want to literally go out there and just vomit all of this on them, even though you as the RWP have all of that knowledge in the back of your head. The other point that I'm going to go ahead and mention here is that we are going to go ahead and walk into an exercise. Now, this is going to be an exercise that is new for you. We did not talk about it in any of the previous modules because it was something that was a little bit more practical for the one-on-one coaching model. It's what we call the mirror exercise. Now, at this point, depending on how all of the other sections before this have gone, you might end up running out of time, okay? So we're going to walk through this mirror exercise and you can decide, hey, is this going to be an action step? Is this going to be something that I change for the student? For the purposes of the practice calls that you do with your partner, you can definitely run through it. You can definitely do it for yourself as well, as you see here in just a second. But you really also need to understand that, hey, these exercises, sometimes you might actually run out of time, and that's okay because you're going to be able to kind of mold this according to the needs of the student. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the mirror exercise so that way you can understand what it is and that way you can deliver it as well. Okay, so the very first section of this is us introducing the mirror exercise. So in order to help us see ourselves from this new perspective, we're going to go ahead and do an exercise together. Okay, Tina, before we start, we have to get into the proper mental headspace. This exercise that we're about to go through together, okay, I'm warning you right now, it's going to feel very awkward in the beginning, okay? And right here, you're kind of keeping a serious face, a serious kind of demeanor, right? Is because you're going to see that this exercise is a little bit awkward. You can decide if you want to include it or not, but I just want to walk you through it, right? It's like, okay, hey, it's going to feel very awkward in the beginning and may even be emotional, but it's going to be extremely beneficial if we stick with it, okay? And so just a reminder, please, Tina, remember, there is no judgment here. The reason why we're doing this is to really set ourselves up for life-changing, long-lasting transformation, okay? So before we start this exercise, I want to make sure that you feel safe, that you're in a safe space. There's no judgment here, okay? I've done this multiple times with myself. I've done this with multiple students before, so you are in good hands, all right? So before we start, how do you feel right now? Are you ready for a little bit of an emotional trip? Just making sure, kind of get a pulse, kind of make sure that the student is in a safe space and does feel comfortable. This is going to be important because you're going to notice what type of exercise this is. It is a little bit of an emotional exercise. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the actual exercise. So, all right, so in a moment, Tina, we're going to go ahead and practice talking to our version 1.0 identity, our version 1.0 self. Okay, we call this the mirror exercise. What is it? It's basically we're going to be talking to our current version 1.0 self that is responsible for creating our current life, and we're going to start talking to that identity, and we're going to go ahead and let that identity know that, hey, I love you. It's okay. I'm changing. There's change that's happening and everything is going to be okay. Now, I know I just said that. Stick with me here. I told you this is initially going to feel awkward, but I promise you it's extremely powerful. Now, note as an RWP, you can replace, I love you with whatever extremely powerful terms you think are going to be applicable for many students, but I love you typically does work here for this exercise. Okay, so you said, cool. Now, before we do this together, I want you to understand who we are actually saying I love you to, okay? We're saying I love you to the part of our identity that has been putting other things as a priority over our health for so long. The version 1.0 self, part of our identity that has sacrificed and self-sabotaged and made choices that were not in favor of our well-being. We're saying I love you to that Tina who we are letting go of. We're saying I love you to the old identity of ourselves, of who we've been and how we have operated thus far. The version of Tina that has worked for Tina for so long. It was an excellent version of Tina's identity for so long, okay? All this time, this identity of Tina helped keep Tina safe and protected. It helped Tina survive the season of life that she was in. And so what we're going to be doing in this mirror activity, in this mirror exercise, is we're saying I love you to the part of Tina that is afraid of changing. We're letting it know it's okay to change. It's okay to be afraid of changing. Many times it feels like when we're changing, we're losing a part of ourselves, right? It feels like we're losing someone. It feels like part of us is dying because we've been so used to this version of ourselves for so long. But remember, nobody ever created anything beautiful in their lives without sacrifice. This is one of my favorite quotes that I really love, is for a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must first become completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it looks like complete destruction. Let that sink in for a second, Tina. When it's time to grow, it doesn't always feel good. It's emotional, it's difficult to let go of. It's like death and destruction, right? But instead of it being death and destruction, what if it was really birth and new, right? And so it's just a matter of talking to that old version of our identity, that old version of Tina, right? And so what we're doing with this exercise is that we are going to go ahead and putting down that old identity of Tina, that old version of Tina that wasn't necessarily the best version that is needed in this new season of life, right? And we can't do that by just simply ignoring the old identity of Tina because she is still there, right? We need to properly let her go. And this is who we are saying, I love you to, right? It's like, hey, I love you, version 1.0 Tina. I am saying goodbye to you now so that way I can become the version 2.0 Tina that will help me achieve my dream life. So goodbye, version 1.0 Tina. I love you. Goodbye, right? And again, I know this might feel awkward. I know we're going to practice this together, but I really just want you to really get into this and really understand that, hey, you're going to look at yourself in the Zoom window and you're going to talk to your version 1.0 self-identity and you're going to say, hey, I love you, old Tina. Thank you for being there with me all this time. Thank you for keeping me safe. I love you and goodbye. And we're going to repeat this a few times until we actually mean it, okay? And this isn't just saying, hey, I love you 3 times and it's over. We might end up having to say this 50 or 60 times, right? We're doing this in order to prepare ourselves to begin the transformation to our version 2.0 self, right? We're no longer this person anymore going forward. We've said goodbye to them and we've put them to rest. Does that make sense? Are you willing to try this with me, Tina? Okay. Now, before you as an RWA student freak out, I do want to go ahead and before I explain this, because I do have some more explanation for this specific exercise here, is that, hey, Coach Yasin, I don't know about this, okay? Do I have to do this exercise specifically? Remember, the point of this practice curriculum and practice coaching calls is to expose you as much as possible to as much practice as possible, okay? So the goal is for you to be able to go through it, practice it, deliver it, take notes on what you liked and what you didn't like, right? The phrasing, the wording, the scripting, everything. Take notes on it, okay? And so there are so many other exercises that we could have included here. There are so many other exercises that you can include here, okay? Sky is the limit of what you would like to include, okay? We just wanted to include this for you so that way you can at least practice it and see how you like it, okay? If it resonates with you and your remote wellness transformation program, awesome. If you don't like it and you want to try something different next time, awesome. Either way, it's all a learning experience as you go through this practice curriculum with these practice coaching calls, okay? So don't judge it. Don't kind of like, say, oh, this is terrible. I don't want to ever do this. Is really just start to understand what the meaning behind it is. And then, hey, learn, tweak, change it. It doesn't matter, but you're really starting to get the practice of all of it coming together. And so with that being said, I do want to go ahead and hop over on top here again, because I do have some additional notes for you on here, okay? So a couple points on here is that you do want to go ahead when you are delivering the mirror exercise and the explanation of it, right? If you laugh or you joke or you kind of say like, oh, it's kind of like we're crazy and we're talking to ourselves or something like that, then the student is also not going to take it seriously, right? So you as the RWP, you want to practice the skill of maintaining that conviction, that frame, and that seriousness, because the student is looking at you, and if you are even 1% not serious about it, then they will not be able to get the right vulnerable headspace that they need to be in, okay? So I know it might sound silly, but honestly, I have never done this with a student who didn't end up in tears or at least emotional when they were going through this, okay? So it kind of starts off as awkward laughs and then they want it to be over, and it just kind of takes patience, right? So don't just do this for like 2 minutes and then let the student off the hook. They will go ahead and miss the depth of the exercise if you go ahead and let them off the hook. Now, remember, if you don't have enough time to be able to include it here, this is something that you can go ahead and include as a homework, but you just have to make sure that they know that their objective is that they have to do do it enough times that they actually mean it and that they actually get emotional about it. Okay, so sometimes that might take 20, 30, 40, 50 times. And the litmus test, the actual like kind of examination for this is that you repeat the exercise enough times where you ask yourself, did I really mean it when I said this? Okay, because once you actually mean it, it's very difficult for our subconscious minds to be holding on to our old identity when we are actually saying goodbye to it. When we actually start to talk to ourselves and our old version of ourselves in this manner, it's much, much easier to lay the foundation and the groundwork to become our version 2.0 self. Okay, so that's a couple notes on this. I have a couple other notes on this in regards to the recommendation, because I would recommend that you do this for yourself as well. Okay, so I've always said from the very beginning that the experience that you have going through your own transformation is going to be your biggest asset throughout this entire process. Okay, so right now, I'm sure as you're going through this entire coaching call practice, as you're going through these practice coaching calls yourself, you're probably nervous. Your version 1.0 self is probably kicking and screaming and saying, is this the point? Is this, valuable? Should I be doing this? And so what version 1.0 of yourself are you holding on to that is scared of becoming an RWP? Are you ready to evolve and become your best self? Are you ready to evolve and become your version 2.0 self? Remember, this is the beauty of this profession, right? The same things that you are talking to your students about, the same things that you are walking your students through is the same things that you are also going through your own journey with, right? It's the same game, just at different levels. Even though you are delivering this to your student within the context of health, well, guess what? I bet you are not where you want to be exactly in your life right now either, in some area of life. And so you can go ahead and apply this to yourself as well, okay? So like, hey, practice doing this for yourself like 10 minutes. Do it with yourself. Like go to the mirror, look at your eyes, study your face, find the part and identity of yourself that you haven't let go of yet and say, hey, I love you, goodbye, and truly mean it, right? And really be able to do it until you get emotional doing it. Now, I know it sounds silly, and a lot of times, a lot of people are like, oh, it sounds, super simple, and, can't be the actual thing. We've talked about this before. Don't get confused between simple and complex. Things are very, very simple in life. They're not necessarily always easy. And so it's a matter of actually doing it that is the difficult part about this, okay? So that's just one point I wanted to go ahead and make, because I do know that this exercise is new for RWA students and is delivered typically in a one-on-one coaching setting. And so that's what I wanted to go ahead and talk to you about for the experience exercise here in coaching call number 4. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and hop over to part number 5 of the coaching calls here, which is the action steps. And so these action steps are going to be very similar to what you have already done. Actually, they're exactly the same as what you've already done, which is that cool. Now that we've gone ahead and done the exercise, it's time for us to talk about our action steps for this week. The first step to becoming your version 2.0 self is to first start with defining our current identity and our current version of ourselves, right? By pinning down and getting clear as to who we are, right? Now, I'm not going to go ahead and read all of this. Again, you can go ahead and tweak this. You can go ahead and change it. It's really just all the frames that are available for you. Make sure that you do go ahead and read through this, so that way you are familiar with this. If you decide to use it, awesome. If you decide not to use it, completely fine as well, right? So it's like, okay, this entire worksheet that we're going to walk you through, Tina, this week, is that it's going to allow us to be able to identify our dysfunctional patterns within our current version 1.0 self. Okay, now remember, this is not who you are. It's only our current version 1.0 self, right? It's only the things that we've learned, the things that we've been programmed, the things that we've been conditioned to, okay? Makes sense? And then what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to go ahead and share your screen and walk them through the action step worksheet, which in this case is going to be the defining your version 1.0 self worksheet. Okay, so that is going to be the first action step that you can potentially include here inside of this coaching call. From there, we go ahead and move on into action step number 2. This is all about breaking your version 1.0 character self. So there is a little bit of an explanation here if you would like to go ahead and explain what breaking your version 1.0 character self identity is. So you can go ahead and kind of share your screen, show visuals of Larry and the identity, right? So this is kind of coming like you guys went through this entire curriculum by going through, the big lie of identity and the big society's problems and all that kind of stuff. So your student doesn't have that context. And so you can kind of mix and match and put that context here a little bit. And then you can go ahead and walk them through the actual activity, which is breaking your version 1.0 identity. And you can ask them like, hey, what are 2 things that you would like to commit to doing this upcoming week to break your current version 1.0 identity, your version 1.0 character? And then you can jot that down inside of your notes. And then if you want, you can also go ahead and remind them them that it is going to feel like, hey, it does feel out of character for you, right? It is going to feel that way, and that is exactly normal for you. Now, you can also go ahead and go back to the training in module 2 and include some other examples, right? We talked about in there the night owl example. We talked about, Coach Malik and shaving his beard and all that kind of stuff, right? So there are other examples if you would like to include it, but this is where you do have the structure as well as some flexibility to kind of mix and match depending on how you're doing with time and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so that is action step number 2. And then we go into action step number 3. And this is where we actually go ahead and continue building on what was previously covered. Okay, so it's like, okay, cool. Finally, this week, we're going to go ahead and continue building on sleep. We're going to go ahead and continue building on, whatever the student was struggling with, right? And so we're going to go ahead and double down and make sure that we keep those things going. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're hyper aware of any temptation to derail or self-sabotage. Okay, so there is an optional question sequence here for you as well. If you want to read through that, you can practice that if you want to as well. And then, of course, after that, we go ahead and close out the action step section by asking them to repeat the action steps back to us. Make sure that they go ahead and write that down. And then at the very tail end here, if you do suspect that the student might not follow through, right, you can go ahead and kind of ask them after they write it down, after they tell you where they're going to put it in the house, all that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, is there anything that is going to prevent you from following through on this? And then you can go ahead and coach them in order to set up the conditions for inevitable success for this upcoming week, right? So you want to start to kind of notice in your program where your students are having this issue of falling off track. And it usually, like we said in previous trainings, comes at these specific points, right? And so that's where you want to go ahead and really hyper pay attention to, like, okay, all of a sudden the universe is giving the student the perfect opportunity to bail, right? It's like, oh, my in-laws are coming to town, or, I'm traveling. Oh, I got this big deadline at work. Well, guess what? All of that is really their version 1.0 self. Their current identity is realizing, oh snap, it's time to go ahead and make change. It's time to commit. All of this is starting to make change, and I need to go ahead and self-sabotage, right? And so it's key to make sure that you're not having your student miss, maybe they're trying to ghost you, maybe they're trying to not do their homework. All of that kind of stuff is very important to be cognizant of and be aware of. And so that's why we're talking about this here in coaching call number 4. It might not always be relevant at coaching call number 4, like we said earlier, but it's important for you to practice this so that way you can go ahead and have this in your tool belt. And then with enough repetition, it's going to kind of become second nature for you, where you don't even really need scripts or any of this. You just know intuitively. But again, remember, skill equals knowledge times reps. You're learning the knowledge, but then with the repetition, that is going to be how you acquire these skills. Okay. After that, we go into the next part, which is ahas, insights, appreciations, and takeaways. Again, I've gone ahead and included a couple different variations for you that you can go ahead and read. And of course, you're more than welcome to go ahead and start adding your own there as well. And then finally, we go ahead and close out. But here, the closeout is a little bit different. Remember, the point of coaching call 4 is to give you practice on handling self-sabotage. And so the self-sabotage that might end up coming up in different coaching calls is that if you feel that the student is tempted to not show up for the next coaching call, or they feel like, they haven't done their homework or anything like that, you might say, hey, Tina, so I want you to recognize that if you feel tempted to not show up next week, or if you feel like, hey, I haven't done my homework, I don't want to show up, I want you to go ahead and really start to take wonder and curiosity as to like, it's very interesting that there's a part of me that finds that it's easier to somehow not to change, right? And it's normal that this version 1.0 self of yourself is really going to start to think, hey, does it have to be this hard? I'm sure there's an easier way, right? And so at the end of the day, Tina, this is what I want you to remember. You took this journey because you wanted to feel better and have a life that was, insert their why, right? And you're moving towards that. And so what happens is that many people stop right short of their biggest breakthroughs right when they're on the edge of reaching them. And so just remember, breakdown often happens right before a breakthrough. The night is darkest right before the sunrise. And so I want you to remember this, is that I'm here to continue to support you, Tina, and stretch you to become the highest version of yourself. You're here in this program to become the best version of yourself, the highest version of yourself, right? And so many times others can see it in ourselves when we can't see it ourselves. And so that's why I'm here, all right? I'm here to hold up that mirror and remind you that you can do this, that you can become the version of yourself that you want to become, and we are going to do this together. Sounds like a plan? Awesome. So Tina, I'm going to see you next week on Wednesday at 5 p.m. All right? Tina responds, XYZ. Awesome. So I can't wait to see you, and I can't wait for you to absolutely continue to crush it, Tina. talk soon, have an amazing week, right? And so then you just go ahead and close it out there. Now, again, this specific coaching sequence, this specific kind of sequence that we just talked about may not be applicable here. You can practice it here, but it may not always be applicable here, okay? But I just want you to know that this is an option, that if you do feel that the student might ghost you, that, they're struggling, they might not do their homework, all of that kind of stuff, you can use this in order to actually properly close out. Now, with all of that being said, we're going to go ahead and now talk about your practice call specifically, so that way you can go ahead and start practicing this. We're going to talk about ditching the script. We've already talked about this before. Don't be a remote control student. Remember, these scripts are only there for training wheels. We went ahead and took the done for you, do it yourself approach. And we did this so that way you can actually start to find your voice, but still have structure around this. So don't get married too closely to these topics or to this curriculum. You're going to be using these practice calls to find your voice, and then really tailor this and gear this in the one-on-one setting to your specific student. Okay. So module 5 is the training wheels. It's there for you to be able to build momentum and really be able to go out there and find your voice. And remember, hey, I've already started seeing that there's a lot of students who are starting to experiment, decided that, you want to take these guides and these images and you want to take all of this and kind of format it differently and then share it with the other RWA students. Please, hey, we're a family here, right? We're not going to get upset. Please share with the other students that's what's working best for you, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to learn from you just as much as you want to be able to learn from us, right? This is a group effort. And what we're doing is we're providing the initial structure, the initial pieces, but at the end of the day, we do not want you to be a remote control student who follows blindly and expects to be spoon-fed, okay? Just like Einstein said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. So we don't want you to be a parrot and just regurgitate all of this. We want you to be able to tap into your own resourcefulness, so that way you are not tied to us for the rest of your life. That's not how we believe education should be. We want to give you the skills, the knowledge, and the tools, so that way you can go out there and be successful with this. So exactly the same way that you are helping your students, I've said this many times before, the same way that you're helping your students to be able to acquire the skills, the knowledge, the tools, so that way your students can do this on their own for the rest of their life. We are taking the same approach, and we want you to be able to do this on your own for the rest of your life as well. So it's the same way that we are doing this to you. This is the same way that you're going to be working with your students as well. And then, of course, also always remember that there are multiple pillars of your transformation product. Even though we are focusing on the training pillars, don't think that that's all there is. There is so much more for us to be able to build. And this is why you're going to see that there is so much value in what it is that you are delivering. And it's going to become so valuable as your product as you go along. Minimum viable product. People only care about transformations and results. So let's go ahead and now talk about coaching call practice number 4. Of course, at this point, you are going to be very familiar with this. Now, the only difference though here is that you are going to be partnering with another partner for this second set of 3 calls. Okay, so you are going to be switching partners. You are going to be commenting your availability and getting another partner and switching from there. Okay, and then of course we talked about why practice calls are important. At this point, you are very, very, very familiar with this. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through this and skip it ahead. Of course, instructions. Make sure you do go ahead and follow how to practice calls. Make sure you do partner up with another partner. Couple important notes on this. You want to make it real or semi-real, right? So if you struggle with any of the topics that the coaching calls are about, you can go ahead and provide your real answers. But if you're like, you know what, this is not something I really struggle with, then I would recommend that you go ahead and pretend to be the ideal student for your partner and, provide some struggles that you think that somebody else would be struggling with. So that way your partner can get as much real practice as possible. And then of course, because you are going to be partnering with another student, make sure that you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves, build some rapport. It's like, hey, I live here and this is my family and really nice to meet you. And we're both students in the RWA program. All of that kind of stuff is going to be helpful for you guys as well, because you guys are going to be working together for quite a while, or at least 3 coaching calls, right? Instructions, make sure you do go ahead and do the pre-work so that way you can read all of this out loud. Make sure you actually do go ahead and set the timer, be respectful of the students' time as well, especially with some of these coaching calls that are a little bit more dense. You might end up going overtime, and that's okay. Just get permission from your partner, and then that way you can go ahead and practice, and that way you know where you need to fine tune and all of that kind of stuff as well, okay? And then obviously then also decide when to partner together for the next coaching call, because this is coaching call number 4. You are going to be partnering with the same partner for the next 2 coaching calls as well. Of course, as you already know, you don't want to take, 6 months or 3 months or a very long time in order to do all these coaching calls. Try to knock them out as best as possible, back to back if possible. And then at the end of the day, I want to go ahead and commend you. Again, you're going to do great. Remember, this is the reason why we practice and you're going through this practice curriculum, is so that way when you start tweaking, you start changing, you start reorganizing, you have your voice, you have more confidence, you understand how all of this is coming together. And throughout this entire process, you're going to be learning so much. So I'm super, super pumped for you. I know you're going to absolutely crush it. Let's go ahead and talk about your action steps. Of course, make sure that you go ahead and watch this training in full. Make sure you go ahead and download all of the documents that are below this specific coaching call inside of the appropriate Google Drive folder. Make sure you prepare your student action notes. Make sure you comment your availability on the coaching call number 4 student community post. Make sure you partner up with another student. Make sure you practice. Make sure you let us know if you have any questions that you have that are specific to coaching calls. Make sure that you go ahead and comment those on the student community post so we can go ahead and help you with that as well. Make sure you go ahead and conduct your practice with your partner, upload it to YouTube, and then go ahead and let us know your takeaways and your recording. Okay, so this has been coaching call number 4. I'm super pumped for you guys to go out there and practice it as a part of the practice curriculum here inside of module 5. And then with that being said, this is Coach Yasin checking out, and I will catch you inside of the next training.